That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Baby Reindeer, the 7-episode series which premiered on Netflix April 11th, 2024, with directors Weronika, Tofilska, and Josephine Bornebusch.
We watched it after several comments encouraging us to do so. It's such a cute name for a series, but this is not a cute little story.
No.
What is it about? It follows writer and performer Richard Gadd's warped relationship with a female stalker and the impact it has on him as he is ultimately forced to face a deep, dark, buried trauma. So, Richard Gadd is the writer and the lead actor, but his character's name is different. So the names have been changed. Mm-hmm. But we have pull quotes. What's yours?
Often frustrating, but eventually poignant, Baby Reindeer boldly explores how various complexities, including sometimes our own complicity, can manifest toxic situations spiraling out of control.
Mine. Dark, gripping, and surprisingly refreshing, Baby Reindeer makes for an excellent watch. Yeah, I enjoyed this. 7 episodes, they're not too long, and I was anxious to keep the party going.
I think especially the first 3 episodes are almost stylized like a thriller, and then by episode 4 it kind of starts to shift a bit.
So what is it about? Donny, played by Richard Gadd, is a struggling comedian and a bartender, and he has moved to London to pursue his comedy career.
He's Scottish.
The character Scottish. Mm-hmm. So he moves to London. And he's working in this bar when one day this sad woman comes in named Martha, played by
Jessica Gunning, who you've seen in the film Pride.
Oh. Mm-hmm. So at first she's like lovely and effervescent and he enjoys her company, but very quickly we realize that she is obsessed with him and that obsession turns to stalking. So that's like half the series is her stalking him and him trying to get help from law enforcement, but it's
eventually,
but because the series opens with him at the police station asking for help, and the cop says, "Well, what took you so long?" Because he says it's been 6 months, and then we start to learn why. And I was surprised because I read a little bit about the film and knew that there was a sexual assault component, and the way it was worded from the things I read, I was assuming that his stalker had sexually assaulted him, Martha. But no, it's at a point earlier on in his time in London, he meets a successful comedy writer named Darrien. Mm-hmm. And this man basically groomed him with the use of drugs to be sexual with him. And I think what you already mentioned in your pull quote, what I found refreshing is how honest this character is about how complicit he was in this assault. And he doesn't even really... Does he use that language?
He says he was raped.
He does say he was raped and groomed, but he also says that he knew that what was happening wasn't right. He still kept going back. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of him, Donny, the character, explaining why he allowed this to happen to him. Because he wanted to feel special, and maybe because he was failing at his career as a comedian, that this attention he was getting from not only this man, but then later from Martha, allowed him to keep it going. But in the end, he does turn her in, because the police keep saying, you need to show us proof that she's threatening you. And he does have proof, but he doesn't want to show it to her. But when things get bad with his parents, that's when he decides.
Because she starts harassing his parents, yeah.
So she gets arrested, charged, sentenced to 9 months in jail. And then he becomes, we can get more into it, but a clip of him doing comedy goes viral because he kind of has a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
So he kind of becomes popular, but then he realizes he doesn't want to do stand-up. And in the end, his living situation also gets really bad. So he ends, which we can talk about more, but he ends up getting a better living situation. Martha's out of the picture, so she's not bothering him. He's come out to his parents as being queer, which we can talk about. And then he goes to confront his groomer, Darrien, and Darrien is very chill about it. Like,
I saw your special.
You want your viral moment where he basically calls out Darrien as like a rapist, and Darrien's like, well, you want to do some more drugs? And also, like, I have a new show I'm doing and I'm hiring comedy writers. It's a paid job. Do you want it? And Donny says yes. The end. So, yeah, this was pretty powerful and relatable in many ways.
Yes, it's compelling, and triggering, and I don't just mean for victims of any kind of sexual assault. I think just as you grow and become to know thyself and how you navigate the world and other humans and develop boundaries.
Let's talk about the main characters. So, Donny. Donny is, I don't know how old he's supposed to be. I'm assuming he's supposed to be in his 20s.
He's supposed to be in his 20s, and that's something that doesn't quite work because this is clearly his story, and he should be in it. But all the talk about how much older and middle-aged Martha is, it's like you two are contemporaries. And
Y'all look like you could have gone to high school together.
they try making Jessica's skin look dry, but it's like that doesn't
her
really...
hair, like her roots are always grown out.
Sure.
But so his brand of comedy is not really working because it's real experimental. It's like
a lot of props.
Andy Kaufman mixed with Carrot Top, but not as fun as either of those people. So he's failing, and when he moves to London, he has a gig at a bar, and it's like he's making no money. So he's real vulnerable when he meets this Darrien guy. But getting back to Donny, he presents as straight. He thinks he's straight, but questions his sexuality after the interactions with Darrien.
And what's further complicated, though, is his living situation, because when he met Darrien, his girlfriend was Keely, and he was living with Keely at her mother's house, Liz. I think, the series has a lot of really great, like, women in it. Like, I like... Anyway, so that he's kind of spirals and internalizes that, and he's no longer sexual with Keely, and she breaks up with him and moves out, and he stays living with her mother.
Well, he even says, I'm kind of married to her. Like, they have a life together. But it's important to know the mother, Liz...
Lost a son.
So she has, like, some trauma, it would seem, and, like, maybe just really likes the fact that there's this other young man in her home. So it seems like they have a really nice relationship. Then there's Martha. I thought the actor playing Martha did a fantastic job.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of along the lines of Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates in Misery.
Yeah, actually. But what do we know about her? She is a lawyer by trade, but is clearly mentally ill.
Yeah.
And has a vast criminal record of, like, stalking and violence towards people. So it would seem that she doesn't practice law anymore. She lives kind of in, like, a shitty apartment. And she spends all day, every day, during this period where she's harassing Donny at the bar he works in. Like, she can't be working.
No.
Another character trait of hers is, as smart as she is, and she speaks very eloquently, this lady cannot type. Like, because an effect used throughout the series is we see her text messages and emails to Donny, and just everything's misspelled.
Oh, yeah.
To a point where it seems like mental. Like,
well, because it is, but...
it's kind of crazy. Darrien is the music producer, the comedy writer, and he just seems... I found him quite interesting because we really don't know much about him, except he seems pretty... he's not drugging Donny. He's telling him, like, here's some GHB, here's some...
But, it starts small. It starts with a little Coke, which they do off the toilet paper... what do you call it?
I thought it was on top of the toilet bowl.
No, it was on top of where you... what's the thing called where you hold the toilet paper?
The toilet paper holder?
The dispenser? Anyway, they do it off the top of that. And then the next thing you know, they're, writing at Darrien's house, and he's like, do you want to get really high? And he... GHB! Like,
well, something else, too.
But it's like...
What were in those little bags?
There's cocaine.
No, remember he gives him... It looks like... those little firecrackers you throw and they pop?
Oh, I don't know that.
They were little baggies of something that was like something. I don't do
Not
drugs.
something I do.
I don't know.
But GHB, it's like, oh, well, that's the date rape.
So then Donny starts dating a trans woman named
Teri,
Teri,
played by Nava Mao.
who I really liked her screen presence.
Same.
She's a therapist. I do have to say, I didn't think, but it felt authentic too that, even though she's a therapist, she's not following the advice she would give one of her patients.
Yeah, that makes sense with some of the therapists I've met, but yeah.
But I really liked her presence, and it's during that period where he's seeing her where Donny he seems really uncomfortable with his sexuality because he thinks everyone can tell he's with a trans woman. So he kind of keeps her hidden, and that doesn't go well. But at a point, he has to tell Teri about Martha. And Teri she's about it because she says, I want to meet this woman. We need to have a talk, which I thought was crazy because she's saying, like, well, I'm a therapist. I can get through to her. Like,
No, but he's underselling just how crazy Martha is seeming.
He is.
Because what's the line that Teri says to him about she says you're keeping her around for some reason because she's fulfilling something that you need, and that's what he doesn't want to admit to himself. But because of that, he can't really reveal everything she's doing because it would seem insane that he hasn't gone to the police yet.
Yeah.
Because he's making excuses not to, and one of those is these compounding lies. Because at a point, when he meets Teri, he says his name is Tony, because he's lied about his name on the app that they met on. So he has to initially lie about how he even knows Martha in the first place.
Yeah. I'm going to go through the highlights of the episode. So episode 1, when we meet Martha, everything's real cute, and Donny likes her. He likes her laugh. It's infectious. She's really complimentary to him. So it's a pleasure. And at a point, she keeps saying, like, I want to hang out with you. And so he agrees to
Go get coffee.
But then she keeps saying she has no money. Even though all her stories are like how important she is, how she's always litigating and meeting with fancy people, but can't ever afford to pay for a diet. The drink he gives her every day is a Diet Coke for free. So she can't afford anything at the coffee shop. And he goes, oh, I'll take care of it. And she's like, ooh, I'll take the waffles, the brownie, she orders like 10 things.
That waitress didn't miss a blink.
But it's in that moment at the coffee shop where we see how volatile Martha is, because she gets mad because Donny says something she doesn't like and she screams at him. But as the audience, we know that this is not good. And then we see at a point that Donny follows her home. And I was like, oh no, don't do that.
And she sees that he's followed her home.
And that amps her up a lot.
Yeah.
But she tells him something creepy because she says, oh, there are times, like, there are people who she really connects with where she wants to, like, unzip them and get inside of their bodies like a skin suit. I already would have been out the picture, but if she would have told me that, it would have been donezo.
Right, and then that episode ends with the Turtles song.
It's also this episode where she tells him, I love you. And he creeps her Facebook page and sees that she has all these Photoshop pictures of her with people. And we also learn in episode 1, her criminal record. So episode 2 is when we were introduced to Donny dating trans women. Oh my God. He's so frustrating the way he handles Martha, because things are already weird. And this is the part that I really connected with. One of the parts that really connected with me is Donny's trying to be friendly with this person who is clearly into him. And she is just being so sexual with him. Like, everything is innuendo. And at a point she gets upset because she feels like he's not interested in her romantically. And instead of him just saying, like, this feels weird, like, this is not an appropriate relationship, like, I work here, you come here, I wouldn't even tell her we could be friends. What does he tell her? The reason he doesn't want to date her? Because of the age gap. And that having kids wouldn't be appropriate. And it's like...
And that sends her off on a different spiral.
Where she literally was like, well, I went to a fertility doctor and he said, I have the eggs of a woman half my age, so having kids is not a problem. So now she's obsessed with that.
This is also the episode where he's accepted her Facebook friend request, and she's commenting on all the pictures. So anything where he's with another woman, she's writing things like, who's this? She's ugly.
Yes. And then she is coming up with the names for their children, which we see some of them. Egbert, Keith, and Neo. I thought that was funny. It's also in this episode where his Donnie's coworkers at the bar, like the bar managers,
They
ain't shit. And at one point, Donnie's trying to tell them, like, you need to bar her, like 86 her from this place. Well, we can't do that because, you know, she could like sue us. And he's trying to show them proof of her like creepy text messages and emails. And one of his coworkers responds to one of her emails saying, I want anal sex from you. Mm-hmm. Do you know how mad I would have been? Oh my God. I was so upset for him.
But the other thing, it's just like, why haven't you blocked those emails? You can block an email.
Yeah. It's this episode. Well, first of all, I forgot who said it, but someone says love is comforting when it's felt one way. Was it Martha who tells him that?
In one of her
rants?
One of her epiphanies of wisdom.
Yeah, but I really related to that too, because I think sometimes it's really easy to dismiss people, which sometimes we have to, but I think it's also important to remember because it can get, I mean, I've been scared sometimes with the way people react to me, like, oh, you are really invested, like you are highly invested in me, and
you don't quite realize it, like something slips and you're like,
and it's like, whoa. And those moments where it's like, ooh, I think I need to be a little more careful with how I deal with this person and be more responsible with how I deal with them. And I think that was what was frustrating with Donny is like, but then he explains as the series goes on that he wasn't accustomed to getting the kind of attention he craved, like positive feedback. So it made sense to me. Like someone like me is like, I've heard it all. I don't care what you think about how I look or how nice that, like, you're not going to get my attention that way. But clearly him, that sounds bad. Like I'm so used
no, but I mean,
like Naomi Campbell getting diamonds, but
I think that's all of us, though. Like as I said, as we grow, you learn to navigate those kind of things, and not that they aren't genuine. It's just that okay, that's just a compliment, and that's it. It doesn't. It shouldn't be feeding this or filling some kind of some black hole inside you, which is I think what people use those kind of things for. And then when people see that vulnerability, they can, dig in further.
It's episode 3 where Teri and Donny had a little snafu. So Donny goes to Teri's house to apologize, but this
reveals his true identity.
And then he reveals his true identity, and then she's mad and was not acting like a therapist should be acting.
But the snafu is he's told her about, he goes to a gay bar to meet her, like in public on her turf. He's done coke, so he's feeling good. She's like, who is this man that, like, you're different? He's like, oh, I'm Tony's alter ego, Donny. And she's like, oh, weird, that's what Martha calls you. And then she asks him to come home with her, and they're on the subway, and she's like kind of almost getting towards begging him for a kiss, and he's looking around nervous, and he steps off the subway
and leaves her.
Yeah. And when he tells Liz, his ex-girlfriend's mother, who he's living with, about the date night that didn't go well, he's like, oh, I got left on the way home. And his mother goes, you don't deserve that kind of attention. It's like, oh.
Well, speaking of Liz, episode 3, I was gagged because Liz likes to have little like cooking parties at her house. Mm-hmm. Like where people can sign up for them. I don't know if she posts them at the library. And guess who shows up at Liz's house where Donny lives? Martha. Talking about her name is Shannon or something.
Sheila.
I was like, I should have expected it, but I was gagged. And then we realized that she went up to his room and left a sexy picture of him. But that sexy picture is important.
Yeah, it comes up again.
It comes up later.
But I mean, that's where, it's frustrating to watch, even though, nobody knows what they're going to do until they're confronted by being in a situation like this. But it's like, that's where you want it to be like, okay, this is hit home. You need to tell Liz what's going on, and you need to prepare people. Otherwise, they could be hurt.
But after this dinner party, Donny tells Martha, if you don't leave and promise never to come back, I'm calling the police. And Martha freaks out. So then that episode, we get a montage of her spending all day, all night, sitting at the bus stop in front of the house Donny lives in, and just like shouting at him. But as the days go by, as the weather changes and it gets more cold, she kind of becomes catatonic. Mm-hmm. And then we hear Donny telling the audience that he started to feel bad for her and he kind of misses her. So he goes out to check on her and gives her a ride home. He was just doing so many things I just couldn't believe.
He does the wrong thing at almost every turn.
So then Donnie's doing this like comedy like competition. He made it to the semifinals. And who shows up? Teri and Martha. So that's not good. And they actually have to end up like running away, Teri and Donnie. They end up at a bar and Martha shows up. And Teri and Martha get into a fight. Like Martha whoops Teri's ass, scratches up her face, yanks out a big chunk of hair from her head. And they don't call the police.
No, he scurries away with her.
I can't believe Teri didn't call the police.
Yeah.
I was very upset about
One of them. Again.
So episode 4, we revisit that opening scene in episode 1 where Donnie's back at the police. And then we get the same scene where the cop goes, well, 6 months, what took you so long? And that's when we get a flashback to Darrien and how Donnie met him. So then we get that whole thing, which you know immediately is not going to go well. Because at this point, Donnie's career at the bar as a comedian is not working, so now he's going to acting school. But then Darrien is telling him Darrien is telling him like, come to my home and I'll teach you how to be a better writer. It's also after the first like assault with Darrien, which I thought was funny because Darrien offers him almond milk and he goes, oh, this should sort you out. Like, so almond milk's the cure for being sexually assaulted and drugged, but
I guess a good salve for GHB after vomiting.
Then we get a montage of Donnie going through his sexual exploration. He was going on, well, first he does like more sort of like, you know, risky things like having sex in public bathrooms with men, women, and in between. But then we also see him going on dates. And he takes all of these dates to the same bar and then walks out on all of them. That's pretty bold.
Yeah, pretty bold.
Or maybe that's kind of smart because then maybe he'll learn like, oh, after all this is said and done, don't ever go back to that bar. But we also, I think something that's very important in episode 4 is we learn that Donnie is explaining to us that the reason he didn't report Martha is because he never reported Darrien. So it's like, well, this person actually like groomed me and raped me.
Once you've been allowed or made yourself so small, I mean, it makes sense. Like when it is all laid out, that why he did what he did and how he chose to respond.
Yeah, but I thought that made a lot of sense. Like he felt guilty.
Yeah.
Like Martha doesn't deserve it. I mean, they both need to be turned in.
Well, they both are these incredibly lonely, kind of broken people that are fitting together in a very toxic way.
So Keely, Liz's daughter, Donnie's ex, she basically, because Martha's also harassing her, so Liz is like, I'm sorry, but I have to kick you out of my home. So episode 5, we see that Donnie moves in with 2 of his acting school buddies. And this is when we really see that maybe he's a little too old to be playing himself back then. But
Sure.
He moves into this amazing like flat. And then of course he's like, well, what's the catch? And the catch is these 2 guys don't work. All they do is party all day. So that's miserable. So then he ends up shacking up with Teri. But then Teri basically gets his ass together and says, like, I can't be with you because you're like, because also he's having like sexual performance issues
and he's asking that they stay inside and don't go out to avoid Martha, but he's not doing anything to improve the situation.
Right.
And so it's kind of like putting her back in the closet, which is like he's not really having any empathy for what her life experience has been and what this kind of stress would do to her. Which is also frustrating to behold.
In episode 5, he goes back to the police and then he actually gets to talk to a detective after because he didn't give the name initially to the detective, but then he gives the name and they're like, oh my God, we know this lady. Talk to the detective and the detective says, we're going to go talk to her. So after that, after Martha gets a visit from the police, she goes silent for a long time, like weeks. And then we see that Donnie's missing her. And that's when that sexy photo comes back because he starts masturbating to her picture. And then we get a fantasy sequence where he goes to have sex with Martha. But we didn't know that it was a fantasy. And like, before I knew that it was fantasy, I was like, I fell off the chair. Like,
I know, and then ruining a nice cover to Juice Newton during that scene.
episode 6 is where we realized that Martha is a lot smarter than we thought initially because she's been recording all of their conversations from day one. So when Donny goes back to the police to report Martha because she's been harassing his parents, the police are like, well, actually, she sent us all these recordings of you asking her for sex, talking about sex, like having a good time with her. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to call it even because she doesn't want to press charges against you. So now he's back to square one. But
Which doesn't seem like a feasible solution for I mean, she's going to do something again.
But then things get real tense because Martha visits Donny at the bar now that she's basically been given the all clear from the police. And she attacks him. She like stabs him in the side of the head with a broken glass. And
Well, that's a pretty... That scene is intense because it mounts to that boiling over point where she's taunting him and ridiculing him in front of another
customer
patron who... This dummy, like...
He was dumb.
She seems like there is something wrong, and he's entertaining what she's saying, and she shows him these apparently early videos of Donnie's comedy, which he's bombing on YouTube, and they're making fun of him, and he goes, oh yeah, why don't you Google her? And she loses it.
But we see he doesn't call the police. Instead, he goes to his final, like that competition he was in. He made it to the finals because they felt bad for him.
But wait, why doesn't he call the police that time?
Why?
His employer, he's all bloody.
Oh, his employer's telling him, don't do it because if you do, like, we'll get in trouble because there wasn't a manager at the bar.
They were out getting coke, yeah.
And I'm like, the way they've treated you this entire time.
They go, we'll take you out and get you a big drink.
When I tell y'all I would have tripped over myself trying to get to the phone to call the police.
But why did nobody in the bar, was that like a Kitty Genovese scenario? Nobody in that bar called the police?
We have a few minutes left, but it's at the end of episode 6 where we get, and I didn't know anything about this, the Richard Gadd before this series, but he goes to the finals and he has a nervous breakdown and basically admits everything. Like, I was raped, I'm confused about my sexuality, there's this crazy ass lady stalking me, and then the episode ends. So episode 7, we see that someone was secretly recording him and it went viral. Mm-hmm. So now he's like doing comedy shows, he's doing podcast interviews.
But Martha also just happened to have gotten a hold of his phone number.
She gets his phone number and then is harassing him again, harassing his parents. And initially he doesn't want to turn her in because she's leaving him like hundreds of voicemails. And he has started cataloging them into different like categories. Like when she's nice, mean, sexy, whatever. Complimentary. So he kind of likes it. But then the final straw is that she's harassing his parents. And that's when he shows the evidence that she is threatening him. She gets arrested, convicted, all that. And then we already explained. But I do think the court scene where she pleads guilty, I thought that was sad.
That was sad. Well, also one of the best scenes, I think, is she, after he goes viral and she leaves a nasty voicemail about, do your parents know all the things that you said in that?
Yes.
He
goes to his parents.
And sits them down, basically comes out to them, talks about his rape, his relationship with Teri, and then he's like, I was so embarrassed. I
feel less of a man.
I feel less of a man.
And then his dad goes, well, would you think I'm less of a man? And of course it's like, wait, what? And it takes Donny a second to realize, like, oh, my dad's telling me that he was also sexually assaulted.
He didn't have to say much. All he had to say was, I grew up in the Catholic Church. And... But, I mean, that was a very well-done scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also thought it was really cute after Donny has this emotional moment telling his parents about what he's been through and explains to them the viral video. Because, like you said, Martha's threatening to tell them. Then we get a little montage of the family having good times, like a weight's been lifted. I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, how nice it is to live your authentic self.
And then we see Donny leave and his parents are at the train stop waving at him and the dad's like, good luck with your transsexual. And I thought that was sweet. Mm-hmm. But I think the moment that I got the most emotional is the final moment of the series is Donnie's listening to Martha's voicemails after he's left, what's that man's name? Darrien's loft, telling him that he'll work for him. So he's upset and he's listening. And then he goes to a bar to order a drink.
A double vodka Coke.
A double vodka Coke.
That sounds terrible.
Which he can't pay for, but we'll get to that. But he listens to, and he has all his Martha voicemails categorized, and he goes to one he had never listened to before. And I was so glad we got this moment, because I'm like, why does she call him Baby Reindeer? And the part where I kind of got the most emotional was hearing her describe why she calls him Baby Reindeer. And it's because when she was a kid, she had a little stuffed baby reindeer, and the reindeer made her always feel like happy times, and its features reminded her of him. And I thought that was sweet. But in the very end, the bartender asked, like, oh, that drink will be $7.25, and Donnie can't pay for it. And the bartender gives him the drink, which is powerful, because earlier in the film, when someone asked Donnie, how did all this start? He says, it started because I gave her a free tea, because I felt sorry for her. So I think that probably was an awakening for him. This bartender felt sorry for him.
But I think, and also maybe something, the silver lining to that for him emotionally was, you know, stalking was her MO, but there really was something special to her about him. It's connected to a childhood memory.
Well, I think that's what he thrived off of, was that even though she's mentally ill, she really did like him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was very surprised by this series.
Yes, and I hadn't heard of him either. I could not see Peter Weller while I was looking at him circa 1987, but...
He kept reminding me of, like, if he ate a few extra cheeseburgers, like Gael Garcia Bernal.
Yeah, I could see that too.
But I really liked his presence, and I would look forward to other things he's in. But yeah, I thought it's obviously dark subject matter, but I felt very relatable and refreshing in the sense that we have this character who's being honest about the parts he played in these moments where he was victimized. You know, so it's like clearly some of these things shouldn't have happened, and it's not blaming him for anything, but his character is acknowledging, like, why, because we don't often get that.
Right, and maybe not for causing them, but for allowing them to continue.
Yeah. I would highly recommend it. What would you give this series?
3.5.
I would give it 4 out of 5. I thought it was excellent. Anything else?
No.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.